Hello and welcome back to another daily cribbage. We are back playing against Jean-Paul. See what we can get. We cut a 4, pretty low. Managed to get the first dealer. And what do we throw away? Well, double 6, double 7 gives us some outs to some big double runs. So let's see if we can get that. Well, a 7 is also pretty good. So we'll try that. Maybe it's better to play the 6. My opponent does get some easy 31s here whenever they have a 10, but they don't have a 10 there, so we get to play our 7, and our opponent has the final 7, which I think is a bit rarer. I was expecting my opponent to have 8 more often. Although, my opponent did show a 2, so from the combo point of view, they have 7s more often, but from the point of view of the actual cards, it's very hard for them to have 7s because we've already seen 3 of them. Alright, 9 king is nice and safe. We keep the double run. We'll lead our queen. Probably slightly better to lead the other queen, but it's all fine. We offload our jack. Opponent starts off with a 9. Opponent has a queen in the back, so we're fully expecting some 10s. No, so opponent has 9, queen, king, 5. So 9 does get paid off by the ace, and our opponent threw away 4-4, which also gets paid off by the ace. So we find ourselves a little bit behind after 2 rounds, but not desperately so. This one could think about keeping 5-7 together in hand, but I'm just going to go with 7-9. I think that's pretty standard. 8 is really good for us, and so we're just going to play up to the 14. Our opponent doesn't have any aces, but they do have 2 4s, and I guess a 3 is my guess. Our opponent has 888 double 2 for 8 points. Double 4, sorry. And almost makes their milestone, but not quite. And we get a huge double run in the crib. So excellent for us. And we'll just look down at triple ace 4, double 4. And we get to throw away 4 queen. The point is whenever we cut a 10, then it's worth 12 points for us. And otherwise 4 queens fairly safe. Maybe it's possible that you're supposed to throw away ace queen because it's slightly safer in the crib, and potentially it's worth the same number of points whenever you cut a 10, but I don't know. 4s are pretty safe in the crib because we also block a lot of the aces. Alright, so now we've got double 3, 4, 5. That's a pretty good hand, 10 points. We're breaking up the 4, 5, 6 a little bit, but that's fine. 4, 5, 6 is only, or 3, 4, 5, 6 is only worth 6 points, but okay, well, this is kind of annoying, but there's a chance our opponent has double 5, and if they don't have double 5, then we get this run. Yeah, it was maybe possible to throw away double 3. I didn't think about it too much because it seemed like such few points compared to double 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so in comparison, double 3 is throwing away a lot of points there. And we're looking to be in good position to get to our next milestone. I think we get to do that either by throwing away 10 king or 8 king. I think also 6 king is possible, but I'll go with 8 king. And okay, well, we got no points in hand. Let's see if we can get anything going here. We're going to play up to 20 so that we don't pay off our opponent's 5s. Expect our opponent does have a lot of 5s here. Maybe it was possible to play the 5 because when you give your opponent the 31, you're only giving them 1 extra point. Computer likes 10 king a little bit more, slightly safer in the crib, but it's very, very marginal. Okay, So we got no points that round, and it looks like our crib is also going to be very angry at us when we throw away 10 king, but we do need to keep some outs available to us, and 8 is excellent. So let's see what we can do with that. Well, our opponent could have something like 12 points here, double 4, 5, 6, and it's hard to avoid that. Our opponent could still have something like 6 points, but if they do have double ace, double ace for 10, that's only 6 points, so they'd only make it to 92 by giving, if we gave them those 6 points, or 93 if they get the go. So I was sort of happy there to be tripled, but when I say happy, I mean I hope it doesn't happen, but I think we can get away with it, is more the point. Okay, double 7, 8, double 9, 10 points. The cut of a 5 is a little annoying, but it's okay. Come up to 27. Opponent has 4, so maybe they've got 4, 5, 6, or 4 ace, 4 ace 10. They had the 4, 5, 6. They kept the cut of a 5, which is really good. So they're going to be almost in position, depending on how bad the crib is. 6 points. Could have been a lot worse. 108 points for our opponent. Okay. And here, I want to keep the 8, 9, 10 together. But I'm thinking about how we're going to win. And I think we need a little bit of luck, because our opponent's going to be in a good position when they... Okay. Opponent has double 8. No. I think if our opponent has a really strong looking hand, or a strong hand, then we can still win a lot of the time. 8, 5. It's going to be interesting to see how they've got this comboed. I assume they've got some 6s here. No, they just had the flush. All right. 8 point or 10 point flush. That is game over. Yeah, that came kind of suddenly at the end there. I think it's... yeah, I wasn't expecting the flush too much, but once your opponent shows you 8, 5, 7, you're sort of mostly worried about the 6. And we didn't have... And I thought we had a good out to the 6 by playing the 9. The point is that if our opponent does have a 6 there, then our... Oh, let's have a look at the position. Let's put it on the board. Okay. Okay, so this was the last play that we had. Our opponent led 8 of diamonds. We played the 2. We didn't pair the 8, and the reason why I avoid pairing the 8 was because I thought that... So in the worst case scenario, our opponent has... say a 10 or 12 point hand, something like double 8, 7, 6, or double 8, 7, 9, something like this. And at the beginning of this round, our opponent started on 108 points. So I thought there was a good chance that we could still beat those kinds of hands. Maybe that's a little too optimistic. Maybe those hands are already too close to winning. We don't have much of a chance, because when you're on 118, 119 points and you become the dealer, our opponent would be the dealer next round. They're going to have a good chance to get those points on the play, and also we're not guaranteed to get anywhere near our next goal, which is to get around 110, 111 points, so that we need 10 points to go out as next pawn. So when our opponent shows us 8, 5, and we gave away... So maybe it's okay to pair the 8 with the idea that we just give up against opponents' hands that have double 8 in them. But our opponent's hand also contains a lot of... lots of trash that has double 8 in it, and the only way it wins is by getting the 8 tripled. So I think that it's fine to avoid pairing the 8, so opponent shows us 8, 5 of diamonds, and we played out our 2 and 10. I did not make a mental note, and I should have done that. Our opponent said go, so our opponent doesn't actually have 6s here, which means that when our opponent leads a 7, our opponent could have, well, our opponent doesn't have 6s, they have 7s plus. So maybe it's fine to play the 8 now, because if our opponent has another 8, then they've got 6, they've got 8 points in hand because of the 3-5, because of the 3 cut. So if we played our 8, our opponent has... So let's have a think about what our opponent could have that is quite strong, but we still beat, hopefully. So if our opponent has an 8, then their hand is worth 8 points. So our opponent would be left on 120, and we lose against that immediately because our opponent will be guaranteed at least 1 point on the next play. We're trying to think of hands that are scoring, I guess, they're going to end up scoring around 116, 17, that kind of thing. Those are things that we can maybe beat. But unfortunately, actually, if we think about it, so our opponent's shown us 7, 8, 5, which is 4 points. So opponent can only have another 3 points in hand, or 3 or 2 points in hand from their last card in order to be a hand that we can possibly beat. Right? We're trying to work out what are our outs here. And if our opponent has a 9, then we pretty much lose to that because the hand would be 5, 7, 8, 9, which if it's not flushed, if it is flushed, then it's game over, and if it is flushed, then we get, or our opponent's going to have 7 points in hand, so taking them to 117, but we have to give at least 2 points away, so they're going to be on 119 or 120 after this. So yeah, we can completely forget about the possibility that our opponent has an 8 or a 9 here, because we just lose to those already. And our opponent doesn't have 6s, which means that actually we can just play the 8 here. It's completely fine, and no matter what our opponent has, either we are in a just about okay spot or we have already lost. As it turns out, so I played the 9, our opponent had a king, so our opponent had the flush, which was enough for the win. It was a pretty tricky game. I think that the other, let's dial it back, there was maybe another spot. Right, so right at the beginning of this final hand, maybe it's worthwhile to think about our position here and how we're feeling. So position is we're at 98 and our opponent's 108. Over the next round, just one round, our opponent's looking to get into round 118 on average. But of course, averages are a little bit deceiving. If things go very well for us, then opponent could be left on 114 or less, and we're going to be in a fantastic spot to go out as pawn next round. And if our opponent does well, then either they're going to be winning this round or they're going to be in a great position to go out on the next play as the dealer. So we have to, I think, get a little bit lucky here. Our opponent is in a good enough position that we should be worried, just like it happened in the game. So it's a possibility that we need to try and keep something that plays a little bit better, but 7, 8, 9, 2 should be okay. It should be okay. And when our opponent leads 8, we probably just have to double that. So probably some missed things. There was another hand that happened a little bit earlier where we managed to, well, we had a really bad, let's see, let's go back. No, not that one. Yeah, it was this one. Yeah, so this was another hand where the computer suggested something slightly different at the end, but we can maybe run through it a little bit slower. So we're at 66 points, our opponent's at 64 points. We are at the beginning of this round when we didn't see, before we saw our cards, we are very happy. We only need 5 points in order to get into position, and our opponent is behind the milestone at 70, so we are really good to go. And getting 5 points as pawn is usually not too difficult. We look down at an awful hand, 4, 6, 8, 10, Jack, King. The only semblance of a combo in our hand is 10 Jack, which can improve to queens and nines, giving us runs of threes. We've got 4, 6, 8, which is not a combo, but it can improve a lot with a lot of odd cards. So any ace, 3, 5, 7, 9 gives us points with 4, 6, 8. And because of that, it's actually pretty reasonable, I think, to throw away 10 king. There are a lot of odd numbers in the deck. We can cut any of those for a couple of points, especially 7s and 5s, although 5s, of course, are never true outs for pawn. The other idea is to throw away 8 king, which is pretty much just as safe as 10 king. 10 king has slightly higher variance. Whenever your opponent throws away 5s, they're going to score a lot more points with 10 king than 8 king. But it's all... but those discards are both pretty similar on average, and I think that 10 Jack allows us to hit some really good top cards. So if we cut a 9 or a 5, the 5s actually do great things for us. We might even be in with a chance for the 5 being better for us than for our opponent. So that's why I mostly went for 8 king. Just it's pretty similar, but it's pretty similar to king 10, but it has the opportunity for us to score a little bit bigger. And according to the discard analyzer on JD Cribbage, the average is around 2.5 for 4, 6, 8 Jack and 2.59, a little bit higher for the one that we kept. But the crib is a bit more dangerous. And I'm curious about what Liam Brown says about this. But I suppose that one thing that is worse about 8 king here as a discard than it would be in other situations is that we don't really have good removal towards cards that combo with the 8. So we don't have any 7s or 9s in hand, and we also don't have too many low cards. The only low card we have is a 4, so the 8 can combo with quite a lot of things here. For instance, you could imagine if we had like 2, 3, 4, 6 in hand, then it's pretty reasonable to throw away 8 king, because we've got 3, 4 in hand, and that's one way to make 7 that combos with the 8. That's a pretty standard one. So let's ask Liam Brown, what do you think about this hand? And this is quite surprising. So I've got the hand right here, and if we have a look at the crib, so Liam Brown tends to agree that 10 king is a little bit better to throw away than 8 king. But let's have a look at the actual averages. It says that 10 king should score an average about 3.9 in the crib, and 8 king should score about 4.26. So the difference between these top two is really significant. It's about 0.3. Right, about 0.3 is getting into pretty large differences. So just to recall, the one that was on JD Cribbage said completely different numbers as well. So apparently 10 king was going to be about 2.4 and 8 king was about 2.5. But now, according to Liam Brown, they're about 3.9 and 4.26. So I think that I think that Liam Brown's right. 3.9 is a much more reasonable sounding average for the crib. Right, if you look over many hands, the crib on average is going to score on average like 4s and 5s. That's between, overall the crib should on average be about 4.8. So saying that the crib is going to be worth about 2.4 or 2.5 on average with a discard of 10 king is kind of crazy. 3.9 sounds much more accurate. Now, one thing to note here is, and this is one thing I wanted to check, let's have a look at those standard deviations in the second column of the crib. 10 king has standard deviation of 3.13, and 8 king has standard deviation of about 2.7. So how do we see this? This means that if we have a look at the histograms, we check out the first two, then 10 king has, they're very hard to see, but the bars at 14, 16, those are non-zero. This is also interesting. There is with 8 king, there's a high chance of getting 12. 3% to get 12. That seems quite high to me. I don't know why there's such a high chance of getting 12. Maybe it's whenever our opponent throws away like 7 and hits a 9, or 7 hits a 6. Maybe that's just what happens when you throw away 8s. For instance, if we throw away 8-10, there's again another spike of about 3.2% at 12. Maybe that's just the risk you run when throwing away 8s in general. Quite surprising. But no, for 10 king, the distribution is mostly concentrated as 0s and 2s, which is kind of what you want. In this situation, we're not looking to get to our next milestone, and so maybe the only thing we can do is to disrupt our opponent as much as possible. Throwing away 10 king does exactly that. Throwing away 8 king, it does mean that we are increasing the chance of our opponent to get 4 or less. So if we have a look here at, let's put in a target score. So if we put in a target score of 3, and we come back to the tables, then 52% of the time, and let me just remove some of these columns just to make it clear. So 52.5% of the time, 10 king is getting 3 or more. And what do I want to figure out here is I want to figure out the point when 8 king is better than 10 king. Because these situations I think do exist. So if our opponent needs to somehow score 3 points from their crib, then, well, actually already that's sort of quite, okay, so let's start off with a target score of 0. Opponent's always getting at least 0 points. Okay, if we set the target score to be 1, then we're looking at the probability that our opponent scores at least 1 in the crib. So that means that there is a higher chance for our opponent to score 0 in the crib by throwing away 10 king, because that number is lower. 2 doesn't really change anything when we look at 3, so that means that now we're looking at the probability of opponent scoring 3 or more in the crib. It's about 52% with 10 king, so that means that 47.5% of the time our opponent is scoring 2 or less, which is still pretty good, and that's better than the 8 king. But then when we get to 5 is so far we want our opponent to score 4 or less in the crib. That's still better to throw away 10 king. It's only when we get to 6. So if we want our opponent to score 6 or less in the crib, then 8 king is a slightly better option. If we need our opponent to score 8 or less in the crib, then 8 king is the slightly better option. And then if we want our opponent to score less than 10 or less, then 10 king's the better option again. So there's a sort of strange spot in the middle where around this mark between 7, 8, if we set our target score to be 7, 8 or 9, then it becomes slightly better for us to throw away 8 king. And that's mostly because of the variance, and that's because you don't, and because whenever your opponent throws away 5s, it combos very well with the 10 king, and that's mostly where that's coming from. So, tricky game, and I hope you got something out of it, and I will see you next time for another Daily Cribbage. Bye for now.